the timing of all of that is not connected to any of the activities of mining or the coming of any of the European, which many of us were exposed to the Spanish first. And it was basically stemming from the south and moving northward a little bit. So when we look at timelines as to when we have been in and around these areas, we can't give you a year. And with how things are academically, science is very evidence-based. And so with what archaeology puts together and presents theoretically is that they really can't figure out when we arrived here. So even at that, the whole archaeological and even anthropology hasn't been able to prove a definitive time of when the Utes arrived, according to them, when we arrived, because according to us and how we've always been taught in relationship to our origin story, we've always been here. And believe me, there are several archaeologists who are working very hard to try to prove that we have migrated here, and I'm still waiting for their outcome. But I'm not gonna hold my breath, because a lot of that is about how we believe, and how we believe is who we are. So our identities are very much tied to the land. Our language very much is tied to the land, and how it came about. So, I love the story you just shared. Part of it kind of is true, and I'll give you that much. We do historically, we as Ute people move through the land. Where we lived was everywhere. So what you said is true in terms of movement, but where I choose to differ from is we've lived here. We've lived here from time immemorial. We learned how to use the land in accordance to what resources were available. One year, maybe the elk were just healthy in this area, which means largely in numbers, you can safely take a nice harvest without hurting the numbers and hurting the ecosystem on how and where they move at. So, it all depended on, like right now, we're in a huge climate, I want to say climate crunch. This isn't the first time this has happened. Our people have always been resilient and observant and adaptive. So when things were present, when things were abundant, were generally when we would harvest. But we moved according to that. We also moved according to season, which is why I say your story is partly true, because during the summer months, this is the coolest place. I mean, how many people want to come to Telluride during festival season? It's the coolest place to be. Physically cool. But it's also the coolest place to be. And this place is beautiful. This place has always played a key part in a lot of our movement. Not only as a youth, but learning about other cultures and how they've seen these places, specifically the valley here and throughout the mountainous areas. Some of the Pueblos believe that this is a part of their migration, and they came through these mountains because there was a time period where the ancestral Puebloans were really the ones who were dominant in movement throughout the Southwest. And the more we learn, the more we're finding out how far north they really got, and they got pretty far north, which is amazing because it also tells us that we don't know everything. And a lot of, very much like what the school of thought with archaeology and anthropology, theoretically, we believe things to have happened this way. So to a sense, everybody lives in that world, and really how we have maneuvered through time is that we take and we process what we learn to understand and experience. So we might not exactly live today the way our ancestors did, but we interpret a lot of what we see and what we've been taught through stories, through learning from the archaeological areas, and even the canyon walls that have the rock art. We learn from them. So it's really about how one begins to piece it all together. We're always going to be learning. That's just a guiding wisdom from our elders. We will always be lifelong learners, and that's just how it is, because we don't know everything.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, and I think this might segue into something that I've been thinking about and is a huge part of the fall event. Regina started the fall event, what was it, 2 years ago? This will be the third one. Where we can come together, different organizations, different people, and build relationships and talk about different environmental or cultural things on our mind. And so the first year was kind of all about storytelling. The second year was very focused on like recreation and reciprocity with land, and this year will be focused on the traditional harvest. And so Regina shared with me that Ute people were traditionally hunters and gatherers, and through a series of events, they now have a farm, and some of their energy's been redirected towards that. But culturally, traditionally, they're hunters and gatherers, and I think Regina has been working to teach others and, within her own community what that's all about and the value of it. And so I think that these lands were also used for those things. And is there anything to elaborate there? Or
An additional R, which is resiliency. Okay. It's through being adaptive to create that resiliency, and I appreciate you acknowledging that. Traditionally we were hunter-gatherers, but today, because of how things have transpired due to policies and the designation of reservation lands, we have had to learn how to become intentional farmers. We didn't intentionally farm historically. We basically foraged off the land. This area was really a huge place of gathering berries, because you all see how many wild berries. This is like huge for raspberries, but you also see the buffalo berries, choke cherries, and probably various other berries that we don't see as much on our reservation that maybe grow in the higher elevations. Elk, deer, these were places that we would come to prepare for the long winter. And so we don't get to move in that way very much anymore. So having to figure out how to develop some sort of resiliency, becoming farmers, becoming intentional planters of our food is one way to create that. And so, through acknowledging and evolving to who we need to become, we can develop some reciprocity through our wisdom, but also moving towards growing and being adaptive to become resilient people. I'm just going to share a real quick story with you all. So when COVID kicked off, I was super freaked out because one day I went to the grocery store and nothing unusual, I seen well-stocked shelves. 2 days later, when things really started to shift into panic mode, I went into the same store and there were bare shelves and people going out the door with cartfuls of supplies and food. Just the panic mode sent me into this state of, oh my God, could my people become the hunters they once were? Could they also adapt to grow their own food out of the sake of taking care of self? And that really got me thinking about who we were culturally, but also who we needed to become into, you know, tomorrow. And that's really largely in part, which lent a lot of the planning efforts and the conversations around traditional harvest and what that looks like. So we're screening a wonderful film that can be seen on Netflix called Gather. You get a chance to watch that video. It just covers so much of what we want to bring to the conversations. It talks about food sovereignty, historical occurrences out in the different locations, like into South Dakota. There's an individual who comes from the California coast who talks about the harvesting of whales and salmon and that. So it covers a whole lot, but just listening to how those are spoken to in respect to who Indigenous people are and how do we create that resiliency, and continuing to learn traditional knowledge, so that we can nurture more traditional ecological knowledge. So traditional knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge, not the same thing, but they do have overlaps.
Awesome.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
How would you define traditional ecological knowledge? What does that look like?
Traditional ecological knowledge really talks more or less about what we've come to know as ecological systems. So what we may look at is how and where the healthy herds of elk move. What do the elk bring to that area? A really good example is buffalo. What do they bring to the area? Not only do they graze lightly, but they also have been found to have something under their hooves that would bring to the landscape that they were grazing in to help nurture and bring plants specific to, and it only came from them. So there was like the interaction relationship with that animal, with the ecosystem, the plants, the water, everything that's tied together in that. And for us, traditional ecological knowledge will derive from stories and relationships from the land and the animals. And that's how we share that. Traditional knowledge is going to be largely focused on like how a young lady would be brought forth, how a young man would be brought forth, more of the ceremonial. It still intersects with the ecological knowledge, but they're not the same.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I can ask a question. I think, like, through my time spent with Regina and others over the past couple of years, the one word I have repeatedly heard, and in many contexts, is reciprocity. And I'd be curious, your thoughts on the word reciprocity, like what it represents for you and your people, and also what role it might play in environmental issues and climate change and all of that.
Great question. That's what every smart person says, right? Reciprocity. So it's a really cool word, and I love to present that to young people because especially the younger ones, I like to listen to them try to wrap their tongue around that. Really cool word, right?
Say it 5 times before they get it.
Yes. But what it represents is the give and take. In order for a plant to grow, I need to give my time. I need to give the energy to watering that, and then maybe that plant will in return continue to grow and maybe fruit. And that's the relationship and representation of what it takes for us to exist together. There's going to be this give and take, and acknowledging when you are responsible for your give, then you take in a very kind, loving, respectful way. So one great example of that for me is the work that we do with traditional harvest. We never take more than we need, and we never will wipe out. Like if there's this really great batch of strawberry, we're not gonna go in and harvest every last strawberry off the bush or that location. We'll take what we need, but we're gonna move on. We may be collecting maybe an abundance of strawberries, but we want to be able to ensure that that will continue to grow, and that's our gift. And our gift is to say a prayer in offering that, thank you for letting us allow us to harvest some of this, but we hope that you continue to grow, not only for other human beings, but for all the beings that are gonna come and also harvest, whether that's animals, whether that's birds, whether that's even beings that are of not this life, but just thinking about someone other than self, and really bringing that to being in the same place. How I think that can be brought into conservation, taking the science and the knowledge from that realm and being able to share that with the traditional values, customs, culture, and the traditional science. The traditional science for us is we've had traditional scientists for many, many generations. Our elders, our healers, they were the traditional scientists. They were the ones who were doing exactly what the pharmacist does. Grabs his thing and pounds it into a really fine powder, makes different teas. And that's what our healers were doing. And so being able to bring those into the same space and allowing for them to interact and be able to exist, to coexist, to teach about the same thing. We're teaching about the same thing. We're just doing it in different languages and different mechanisms and techniques. But to be able to bring that together, that's creating reciprocity and being able to share in those spaces.
Yeah, I really agree with what Regina is saying, especially like when I've been working with kids and trying to educate them on some of these issues. I've been trying to take that approach of including reciprocity and feeling inspired by Indigenous communities in the way that they have that honor and give and take, and like how do I intertwine that into curriculum? Well, Regina was talking about traditional ecological knowledge, and I feel like it's easy to want to like take pieces of things and integrate them because it seems useful, but that word reciprocity reminds me that it's more of a perspective and like an approach than just like a specific tool or specific topic or plant or whatever. And I've noticed when kids get the opportunity to express that gratitude and connection to land, it's like their perspective on what we're learning about shifts, and I feel like it's really powerful. And so thank you for sharing that, because it's really helped me, I feel like, become a better educator and have like a more well-rounded understanding of some of these environmental issues and how to I don't like love the word combat, but how to put actionable solutions to them. And I feel like the internal piece is something that sometimes gets missed, but when the internal piece is included and like one's perspective and emotions and spirituality gets tied into that, it's like people are so much more willing to solve the problems and think deeply about it, and it can be really powerful. So I appreciate that sentiment a lot. I guess anyone else? Sorry,
Yeah,
anyone else? Yeah.
I'd love to also, so you've been coming to Telluride for many, many years now, and I don't know the exact number, but I'm wondering, through your visits here, if there were maybe one thing you think could be helpful to bridge between our communities, right? And I think it's happening, as I'm experiencing it, it's happening in small possibilities, right? Small groups get together, like at the fall gathering, which are awesome. And I wonder, how could it be more pervasive? What are some possible ways our two communities could be relating to each other more, just on an ongoing basis, to form the relationships that then allow the reciprocity, you know, to just flow from that? And if there's any good thoughts.
Yes. Thank you for asking that great question. Because moments like this give me the opportunity to dream, and I'm a person who loves to dream, and then I let other people raise the money.
I'm good with that.
So, one of the best ways that I believe we can begin to bridge some of those gaps is starting with the young people, and I think that we've been on the right track in developing some of this and getting the young people from the tribal communities here, with like the ski day and the high camp, and I think we've done a few other things associated with the Indigenous Peoples Day, dancing and sharing song and all of that. But something that, you know, this is a great opportunity to share it with you all here, which I'm gonna share our big dream. Our big dream. So,
Yes.
I see, this is what I see. The tribal communities and kids, Indigenous children of all ages, that includes me, just come here to experience the land and be back on this land, but not only experience it in our little groups, but to be able to experience it with the local kids. Because I think that the understanding of why Telluride really came to be established is always looked at as almost the point of when this world here started, which was directly tied to mining activities. And it's okay that we hear these stories. It's wonderful for us to hear the stories of how certain families came here, and how, you know, they celebrated the 4th of July in 1978. What did this place look like? Because our kids don't get that interaction. But it's really the beauty of all of that, and we experienced this was that last weekend?
Might have been.
Because
A lot has happened.
There's something special that happens when the kids put their feet on this ground. It's like, it's strange at first, but it's like they get to connect. They get to do this really cool little upload. I'm very technology minded. That's where my first thought I was gonna get rich was gonna come from. But they get to upload that from being out on the land, and when they get their hands into the dirt, oh God, that's so intoxicating. The smell of fresh dirt when they get to plant a tree. Something happens to them. And believe me, I know several of the young people that came up. And some of them are pretty rambunctious and a little on the hyper side, but I've seen different people. And you know, we if we put these together where we learn together, maybe some of the local kids share their passion of rock climbing, or you know, whatever that is in this area, and they experience it together, then there's a bridge, because who becomes the adults tomorrow? We're only getting older. They're the ones who are going to be those leaders. They're the ones who are going to be left to inherit all that needs to be healed. And that's where the healing comes from, is the young people. And so the more we can do things and support some of that effort, which is my big dream here, that Leah and I were kind of, I've had this thing about trails.
You have to tell them.
Yes. For a long time now, I think one of the first things that I came to TI with was this huge dream that I wanted to see ute trails that connect our tribal community with the valley here. I'll see Duffy. And you know, working with MLC, one of the things that I learned through a survey effort was that young people don't connect to land the same way that us older folks do it. That's odd to say. Because I see land use in a very traditional and cultural way. Young people see land in a different way. They want to go paddle boarding, they wanna go hiking, they wanna learn how to ski, they wanna use the land in a very contemporary way. That's not wrong, but if that's how we can introduce them back to their traditional homelands, it's a win-win. And they get to learn about space that our people used to live in, but it's a tremendous opportunity for them to also learn about public lands, which we all get to take part in. And you know, it's just a tremendous opportunity to think about how we could organize extensive trails that would connect our communities to this area, exposing, you know, I think they shared with us everything from horseback riding to hiking, rock climbing,
Mountain biking, fishing,
backpacking.
skiing, backpack. They want to do all of it.
Yeah.
Except they all want to do something different. So then we're just like, okay, which one do we start?
So, you know, and connecting our resources and bringing our communities together to experience the land together. And I'm sure many of us have been on trails out there that, you know, have either grown up with. But imagine experiencing that with someone new, someone from a tribal community, who probably would give them the whole entire perspective and experience on that trail of what it meant to their family or to the tribal people, or just having that experience of putting their feet down where their ancestors are. I get that feeling all the time. And I've enjoyed coming to Telluride. I've been coming to Telluride my whole life, but I can tell you that the streets didn't always look like this. Nor did the buildings, or that this town struggled to keep open a handful of stores. Some of the structures were compromised and bricks were falling. This place was barely holding together. I came to this town many times with my family, and we literally would walk all in. It's so funny, because today it feels like the walk is a little longer, and it's probably because there's more things going on. But I could remember as a young girl walking down the street, and it just seemed like a straight shot, and we were already on the other side. But you know, being here and experiencing everything from what I have as a former elected official, and to be a part of something that has grown, and to help cultivate that and nurture that, it just brings us to a point of how do we adapt to becoming and nurturing those bridges. It isn't about us, really. It's about the next generations. It's about those younger people. If we can empower them, inspire them, and nurture them, they can develop those relationships. One of the things that I understood with our project, the traditional harvest. Traditional harvest is the action. The true value is the relationship building. And that isn't just between people, that's between people, the land, and the life that is happening on the land. And even more so, as I've learned over the past week or so, has a lot to do with water. Whether we have enough of it or not, and what complicated conversations are happening around that. So there's a whole lot of opportunity that I think that we could bring together, and you know, our young people, if they can experience and learn these together, we're creating a world that's more tolerant of each other, which we know so many generations have worked hard to keep us divided, to tell us what lines we should not cross. And I think we should just blur those lines.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So what about the other R word, repatriation?
Repatriation. I think that comes a lot with respect. It's very closely tied with respect. it's funny, I was just having a conversation with my dad about this. You know, the best thing we could do is not disturb something, but that doesn't always happen. Because we're a society in constant development and engineering, which means we're trying to find the next best place to build the next best resort or building or playground. And when this happens, a lot of times they come across things that are either funerary objects and even remains. To be respectful of those would be able to allow for the process of laying those things back to rest. And I think it's just, I don't know any other way other than to say respect those things, because really in our culture it isn't ours to take or disturb or move, but it does happen. And the best way to rectify that is to go back and put it away as closely in the way you found it, and as closely to the place that you found it. And that's not possible. Just do your best. But, you know, repatriation is really important. And for us, it's really, I don't wanna say it's scary, but it's something that has a high priority to make sure that it is cared for in the right way.
And on a big scale, like land conservation, your experience as a leader at Bears is like when you start to repatriate land back into tribal ownership. Sometimes I feel like that's a white man's concoction, to be honest. And a big geo conservation, kind of this is what we're doing, but what's the reality when we try to restore indigenous lands to tribal ownership?
Well, you said a lot right there, and that all encompassed a process that we technically don't even have language for, because we always believed that we didn't own the land. And so through that effort, somebody had to own the land, and now they're trying to return it back. And, you know, we didn't learn ownership until after we were placed on reservations. So it's a little hard, but I think one of the cool things that transpired with Bears Ears is that it's 5 tribes, which is not one tribe. So technically, it's not one tribe, so to say, controlling or acquiring ownership of that. It's a shared effort, which I think says a lot in terms of stewardship. Stewardship is a word that is closely tied with reciprocity. I don't think that you can apply good stewardship without encompassing reciprocity, the give and take and sharing gratitude for those places. So, you know, it's technically it's a great idea, and it sounds like somebody can now sleep at night, but in reality, it really isn't. And for us, don't get me wrong, we're grateful for the whole act and action, but we also see that the place that we would like protected in the manners that we see fit still aren't there. We're still not achieving those standards and the ways in the respectful cultures that, and granted, you know, there's many cultures out there specifically tied to that place, not just the 5 tribes, but other indigenous people are tied to those locations. The land back movement is just in theory, in words, because sometimes when land is gifted back to a tribal nation, sometimes it's actually just a shift of some burden and responsibility, because it takes a lot for land to be returned or to be listed as trust land. So any property that is gifted back to a tribe or a group really technically is just like the gift of property to anyone else. So that group will be responsible for property taxes and any other dues of that sort. That's why I say sometimes it's just a shift of burden.
Yeah, I get it.
But for me, land back is times like this. I get to put my feet down in the locations of where my ancestors once were. That's enough for me.
You know, we were talking about land back, you know, within the context of the Institute the other day, and there's the idea of a third entity, like a holding entity, like the Nature Conservancy. Think of a culture conservancy. If there was some agency, institute, entity that would take on the responsibility of, you know, owning property in the modern world, insurance, taxes, etc., just as you said, but it wasn't, the burden wasn't transferred, but the kind of acknowledgement that there was a cultural shared condition that might be a path forward.
That is one great consideration, and I think that that's something that is actually being worked on in various ways throughout the country. Some land trust organizations are leading some projects in collaboration with several tribes as well as indigenous groups. Some of them aren't federally recognized, so they're moving through that. And really, when it comes back to what does land back really look like, it is like so many different colors, it's so many different versions. And it's very reminiscent to every indigenous group throughout the world is always going to look different because of who they are and how their cultures have existed. So, you know, some might be really happy to take that land and have that ownership and possession. Others were like, not today, I don't feel like collecting another bill.
Right.
Believe me, and we've been approached. We've been approached by, even during the time that I served on council, we were offered some land transfers, and we're like, we really want to, and we really appreciate the thought, but really we can't take on another burden.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
burden. That's the irony of the whole situation is that you didn't know land ownership until it was taken away from you. Then when it's tried to legally be given back, it is one of the most complicated situations, both from a property issue but from a tribal issue. And it's just a fascinating concept to me that it was taken, but here we want to give it back, and you should be honored to have it. And the reality is, that's not how it always works.
That's, to me, that's a great example that cannot be called in true reciprocity.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's just not that strong. I mean, yeah, you're telling me I should be thankful because you're giving me
Right.
your burden. Not connecting with that.
And then the other question is like just acknowledging, you know, the land acknowledgements, is that enough? So it's always a really interesting struggle to figure out, do you do the right thing to return land into tribal ownership and the burden that comes with that. On the flip side is just acknowledging land acknowledgement enough, and where do you fit in those things?
That's a great point. I mean, we could just talk all evening about that. And it has impacted me and my views. And I've been like, if I wanted to, I could just address that whole conversation for the rest of the year. But, you know, one of the things that I have kind of shifted my thinking about that is, I think what would make land acknowledgements interesting is if, you know, yes, you do acknowledge the cultural presence of various indigenous groups, but if you can encompass that with some kind of action that you are acknowledging, hence, we are going to pick up the trash on the nearest reservation for the next 25 years. You know, if it was encompassed with an action of return, something that, you know, says we can't undo history, but hey, I want to put my best foot forward, and what that could look like to me is picking up trash on the reservation.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a way that we can begin to bring it together and do things in a way that creates a form of reciprocity.
Regina, you in your introduction, we learned about your involvement with Montezuma Land Conservancy, MLC. Yeah, I think you said MLC, but not everybody probably knows about the Montezuma Land Conservancy. Could you talk just briefly about some of the work that you guys have done with MLC?
So, interestingly enough, it's got a tie to the Telluride Institute. So several years ago, the Telluride Institute approached Montezuma Land Conservancy as a partner to come up with a way to engage the tribal community in Toyaka Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. And at that point, I think I was just one of the voices from the Institute. So I was helping to shape and mold what this might look like. And so we joined together and submitted a GoCo grant. And we were given that grant. And little did I know that, you know, here I was creating another opportunity. And so, you know, it was thought that one of the best ways to bring forth some of the efforts of creating that relationship with the tribal community would be to hire a tribal community member. And I think at that point, Tucker and the executive director asked me, would you be interested? Because it would save us a lot of time from having to advertise. Is that a good reason? Okay.
That's a good reason.
And I said, okay, on one pretense. And they said, what is your pretense? That I only work part-time for 20 hours a week because I'm going to school.
Yeah.
And they were more than happy to accommodate that. But really, what my main objective of that whole experience is to make sure that we did establish a good working relationship with the tribal community. What would that look like? No clue, and no idea what my job technically was going to be from day to day. Basically feeling like I was shooting from the hip every time I wanted to present something. But we learned and we figured out what this work was going to look like. And I quickly figured out again what I recommended here. The real work begins with the young people. If we can teach them, we can create great adults. We can give them the knowledge, the tools that they need. Very reminiscent to how we're taught as young people in our culture. It's all about teaching them in a very kind way, and it's not necessarily teaching them as much as it is bringing them along. So when we teach our children how to dance and sing, we don't sit down and present a book, or we do it with them. So we dance with them, we sing with them, we bring them along, and that's very true of many of the indigenous cultures, and that's how the young people learn the ceremonies, they learn the language, they learn the dances, is by it being done along the side of the adults. So we took that and I said we want to focus more on the young people, but can't do it unless I have the elders. So I was like, oh yeah, maybe I better bring the elders. So it became more of an intergenerational endeavor, and so it's all centered around storytelling. And so, you know, the first year our elders came out during a very strict COVID time period. We were outside and it was a beautiful, brisk October day. And I didn't know how it was going to turn out, but the elders shared so much. several of them said, I've got to leave here in 5 minutes. And we were like, okay, will you be safe? An hour later, they were still there. I was like, I thought you were going to leave. And they were like, yeah, but I wanted to talk to this person. So the networking and the stories, the engagement, it just happened in such a way that I knew that the elders and the young people, we needed to bring them together. We needed to do something. And so right now, it seems to be that through the traditional harvest planning efforts, we're doing exactly that. It's through those stories and knowledge of the elders that are going to help us carry forth and present this knowledge to the young people. We just opened up our charter school a couple of years ago, and right now, which I'm just extremely excited, we're going to share with the young people there about gardening and growing their own food. And we're also going to be outreaching to the elders who just received their own grow dome, and to help them, maybe the young people start the starter plants and take it to the elders, and the elders and then. So it's a great way to develop that that resiliency, but also through intergenerational learning. We get the knowledge of the stories, but the kids get to carry their knowledge of what they're learning about the plants and teaching of how to grow, becoming intentional food growers, and share that with the elders. So, it's that beautiful interaction that my work at MLC has really helped me to see through my vision, see through my dreams, but even more so, and I know I'm going to get teary-eyed, to recognize the hope. And, I don't know about many of you, but I grew up in the 70s, and I was like severely traumatized by one movie in particular called The Late Great Planet Earth, which talked about kind of where we're at today, which is, climate change, and seeing some of the species changing. It scared the living tar out of me. I was like, I'm not even gonna grow up to have a family, and what is this place gonna look like? Will we have food? What kind of water will we be drinking? What are all these things? And so I was like severely traumatized. But the hope was, I was raised very traditionally, and so my parents and my grandparents always taught us about ceremony and our songs, and we were brought along in that way. And so I just learned to not pay attention to that movie anymore, but it was really traumatizing. And when I think about how some of the young people are today, with a lot of the conversation about climate change, the climate crisis, what are we going to do? We just experienced one of the most severe droughts that we're still trying to bounce back from. I can only imagine what some of the young people are feeling, and this is really a time that we can instill some hope, and we're seeing it. We spent the weekend with several young people that I was just amazed at the connection, and for them to get off, but the reservation, but even more so to recognize that this is home too. And I mean, if any of you follow me on Facebook, I always say, "You gals home." I'm in Telluride, and I see that everywhere I go. Because it is home. It's when I get to go home, and my ancestors get to acknowledge my presence. So it's a beautiful place. There's many creative minds and resources that we can bring together, and bring in the elders and the youth to experience a lot of this. how can conservation play a key role? Supporting that. When we do things, don't be the engineers, be the support. And I say that because I just severely have this thing about engineers. They always have an outcome. They always have a product. And it's not always the best for our environment. The dams, a good example of engineering an outcome for 100 years down the road. And then we're left with what? Trying to figure out how to deal with this. And what ecosystems did damming the rivers do damage and take away? What are things that our grandchildren and children won't get to experience after a dam was established? And it's really, really traumatizing when I think that my grandchildren will never learn how to saddle a horse unless we go to a stall. They won't be able to learn the way I did, which was go to my grandfather's livestock camp and throw the saddle up on there and throw a couple of bales of hay so I could just actually get to the stirrup. Things like that. It's those experiences that we have to be creative about how we live with our experiences. The environment is really our biggest learning tool. How many of you have been to the Ute Indian Museum in Montrose? Or the History Colorado exhibition? Well, so there's a few key quotes on there, written on the land. Really, I always say that our biggest teacher is the land herself. We wouldn't know where we are. We wouldn't know what we need. And it's been the canyon walls tell the stories with the petroglyphs, but they also tell the stories of where the water lines were, right? So, and change. When the glaciers moved in and out of there, they're the biggest storytellers. And, at the Ute Indian Museum, you'll see the building itself is its own story. Elders came together and we consulted with History Colorado about how that building was going to come together during the expansion. The first engineer and architecture group that approached us wanted it built to resemble that of a ancestral Puebloan structure. We were like, but we're not Pueblo. We don't even have Pueblo ancestry. So it doesn't make sense that this is a Ute Indian Museum and we want it to be shaped like a Pueblo structure. And the elders really were very vocal about that. So to us, our structures are teepee-like, or the wiki of the wood structures, which is the large, oversized one outside. And you see the building has some round features in that. The circular feature is very, very important to Ute culture, as well as a lot of indigenous people of the world. So we wanted something to reflect the round of like our homes. The engineer and the architecture did not like it, so they quit. And we were like, okay. See ya. Next. And so, we did a lot in terms of trying to bring that voice to the table. But like I said, the colors of the little tile inside the building, those are very representative of the four sacred directions. So, there's so many details in that building. That building is its own story. So if you ever just get to walk through, just take in the building and the structure and the colors.
And there's an event this Friday, is that something you would
Yeah.
encourage
Oh, yeah.
folks here to go to?
I got that. So, I also do some work around water. The Saving the Dolores campaign, is viewing their film, The River of Sorrows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which depicts the travel and talks about the dam and how that impacted the downward flows of the Dolores River, and just the landscape themselves. I will be over there facilitating that conversation with several of the individuals who helped in the film, as well as I was in that film as well.
Great.
In Montrose?
Yeah.
Yes.
At the museum.
Friday night.
This Friday?
Yes.
I had an idea that if there was events down where you live, that we would be allowed to come to, the Telluride Institute could spread the word around here, and we could
Yeah.
have
Well,
a
we've
thing
been
like that.
working on wanting to better amplify the celebration in the spring, which is our bear dance, which public is invited. So, you know, we love to see visitors. I love to host visitors. So, you know, anytime.
When is the bear dance?
It is the first week in June, the first weekend in June.
And there's many ceremonies that are closed to outsiders,
Yes.
I'm sure.
There's like the Sundance, which is a little bit later, several weeks later from that. That is kind of more of an intimate cultural ceremony. But they'll also, we host powwows, and those are open to the public. I know Southern Ute does their fair in September, which is a nice big powwow. And then Ute Mountain, we usually host our larger powwow near the casino in August.
We could share it on the
And
TI
our-
website.
Yeah, for sure,
What is
for
the
sure.
fall event?
That is happening October 20th, but the community portion of that is kind of held to the community. But we will host a the Sunflower Theater in Cortez, a screening and a panel discussion of the film Gathering. And so if you go to like the website for the Sunflower, I think they should have tickets available.
And that's on the 20th? Or
Yes,
on
the evening of the 20th.
Oh, okay.
And that, and just if you wanna
That's
help,
what we were talking about.
all the proceeds from
Can-
the evening's, filming event
Yeah.
are going to be, donated to the academy, the charter school in Toyot, their garden project.
Oh, awesome.
Nice.
Where-
So
where
that's
in
a
Co-
fundraiser in Cortez on the 20th,
In-
and people are invited?
Mhm.
In
Well, as many as that can get in the
Where is it? Where is it, Regina?
The Sunflower is a theater downtown Cortez.
Oh, that's Sunflower.
The one with all
okay.
the neon?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
No.
but across the street,
Okay.
and almost kitty corner.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna plug another event. We have Regina coming in November 17th for a transformational leadership workshop. So it's Regina and Rick Chavala, Annetta, Claudia, local leaders really around equity, justice, equity, you know, specifically in the environmental movement, but just as, you know, how we relate to our community at large. So they're kind of our star. November 17th at the library.
Awesome. Thank
In
you.
that, in the evening?
No, it's a workshop during the day.
Oh, okay.
So I have breakout sessions. Regina, Rick will lead these sessions, and it's really meant for nonprofit and community members to join and just expand your not only your personal but professional scope around justice and equity.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason.
Great.
That's, is that on the website?
It is. Yeah. There's a. I think April's sitting out.
She did today.
Did she sit down?
I'll have to
today?
share it with you.
And, you know, anytime there is any movement that is in the realm of injustice, you are all more than happy, we're all more than happy to share more information. Also ways that you can help support that effort. Speaking of which, we have one that's actually coming up on Saturday in the White Mesa community, in southeastern Utah, which, is probably one of the most heartbreaking, examples of injustice. So the White Mesa community, which is just directly south of the White Mesa Mill, which is the only existing and operating uranium processing mill in the country, which has been receiving and accepting material even from out of the country, and is owned by and run by a Canadian company. So, you know, this is something that our community has been trying our best to raise awareness about, and really one of the things that is really helping us to help others is figuring out how we can engage other communities about helping to raise that awareness by reaching out to your elected officials, because just as he mentioned the logging, well, the material many of us don't know, but sometimes it comes right through our communities.
Yeah. You know, just the nonprofits from Telluride alone could do a great deal to amplify.
The media,
Yeah.
they call it like a rave. Where you just
Yeah.
you come in with writers and filmmakers, and
Yeah.
we talk to you or whoever you want us to talk to.
Yeah.
And we would
That would be
we would make
great.
something,
Awesome.
and Mountain Film would be involved.
Yeah.
So we should all
Yeah.
amplify it,
Yeah.
all of us. So that's this, what date is that again? This
It's-
Saturday?
It's this Saturday, but we do work around this a lot. We have been, one of the nonprofits that has been very instrumental has been the Grand Canyon Trust.
Oh,
So
Jimmy,
if you go to the Grand Canyon Trust website, you can
Yeah.
get more information on the White Mesa Mill. They've done a lot of work, just talking about how this can impact the community. They probably have some of the work and the study around the water quality, which is something that I've always been concerned about. Cause in the Southwest, we don't have a lot of water or water resources, and there is a aquifer that is pretty close to being beneath the tailing impoundments. And some of the-
online, and you say that there's, some of the older ones were unlined.
Yep, we have one that, the older one has, the oldest one, is unlined. Then the one following that is very poorly lined and probably just bad. And then the others, they say they're aligned appropriately.
Have you met Deb Howland, Secretary of Interior? Have you had communication with her?
They have, yeah.
I mean,
She's been down in the area a number of times.
is she aware of?
Oh, she's aware. of it.
Okay. Just-
Yeah.
Is that public land that they're mining?
No, they've, well, the processing, mill is their private property, but where they're mining and where they're, getting the leases to are on public
Yeah,
lands.
well,
Public land.
Yeah.
Or Forest
Yeah.
Service. Is it BLM or Forest Service?
BLM.
BLM?
Yeah. So
The
there's,
Grand Canyon Trust is they're exceptional.
Yeah,
Jim Enote.
Jim Eno,
Yeah.
he's amazing.
Yeah. But they have
He's
effectively
Zuni. Yeah.
killed 2 uranium mines in Arizona, right? So they're a fantastic organization to get behind.
yeah, absolutely. They were, one of the huge moving forces behind the, Bears Ears movement.
Yeah. And Mr. Charles Wilkinson.
The late Charles.
The late Charles Wilkinson.
Very dear friend.
And he was a professor at CU Boulder and founder of another
One of the original
founders
founders.
in American Rights Front.
Oh.
Stalwart tribal
American
conservation
Rights Front.
issues in
Like lawyer.
the West.
Yeah.
Charles Wilkinson. just passed away.
Like in November.
Wilkinson?
Yep.
Is Wilkinson as in the,
No,
She
no.
just
No,
This was Larry.
oh,
Is the language being spoken in the school your native language, or?
They are doing their efforts right now. So the charter schools on each of the 3 reservations are actually have incorporated that into a lot of their curriculum. And so it's kind of exciting. My mom, as I was growing up, my mom worked in the tribal Head Start all her professional life, and so she put a lot of effort in that. So it's really nice now because I have 2 nieces who are working in the charter school, and so it's cute watching them now put together their lesson plans and incorporating language, culture, and into their science and their math and all these different things. And so my mom just gets to pull that up watching them, and so she's just like, I want to get dressed up and go to work with them.
so they're counting in Ute?
Oh yeah,
And is the language called Ute?
yes.
There's a magazine on the Navajo Res, Leading the Way. You can subscribe to it, I do it, and it's everything you're talking about. And they're just trying to keep everything going in a positive light in the face of so much. Leading the Way, you can subscribe. It's a wonderful monthly magazine.
Do you ladies have any questions?
Follow you on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Regina. Let me look.
All this work.
It's okay. I am.
Well, she's pulling that up. Leah, are there any other kids programs that are happening soon, or any ways that you can get involved or volunteer coming up with TI?
Well,
White Skunk Regina? White
Um,
Skunk Regina.
so for the past, I think this will be like the 7th year for the Youth Ski Day. Last year we added
White
to the
skunk.
ski day by
White skunk.
having a film at Mountain School where families and kids from Mountain School came and watched Connor Ryan.
Oh, they're
I don't know,
different?
maybe have you guys seen Connor Ryan ski? Yeah, okay. So we watched that and briefly chatted afterwards. I think some of the kids were nervous, so they didn't do a lot of talking, but we'll keep working on that.
It is.
But I think what I think could use the most help, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it, is so Telski works with us to offer a day of ski passes for the kids, but that's just not enough, in my opinion. There's got to be a way where we can make this a longer opportunity or create more ski days or more recreation events, because like Regina said, they're kind of hungry to get outside and like experience it, but
And it's like if you live here, there's ski PE and there's
right.
opportunities.
So we've like thought of some ideas a little more aimed towards the summer, but soonest
Bye.
soonest is the ski day, and I want to find a way to make it 2 or 3 days of skiing. But I think me only being the one to speak to that and ask that for Telski may not be enough. So I don't have the right mechanism of how to do that, but I really want to encourage them to be more open and willing to provide those passes regardless of cost. So that would be helpful. But then, yeah, I think we will be trying to add ice climbing into the mix, maybe one day with Mountain Trip, and hopefully do like another film. And so that is something that I can email to all of the organizations for whoever's interested and post it around town for people to participate in.
I think like creating the bridges, there's like knowing about these things is helpful.
Yeah.
We at Eco Action can definitely spread the word and ensure everybody's up to too.
So I can totally, yeah, keep you guys in the loop. The more people that help us makes the experience better. I worked with Seas of Trees on the last one, and that was really cool because, we got to add that reciprocity piece of planting trees and planting them at high camp, which hasn't really been done, but also paired with rock climbing because Mountain Trip, donated that. So the more people that work together, I think it's always a better experience. But then past the ski day, Regina and I have just talked about finding more ways to get youth in the mountains. So, like some of the trail systems that she was talking about is we were like, oh, what if we could, identify one of these youth trails that maybe kind of overlaps with a current trail. I know part of the Colorado Trail definitely overlaps. I think it's the Molasse Pass section. So we were like, oh, maybe we can do a bike pack or a backpack or whatever it is. So I think, more community members involved in that, or more students from the area involved would be awesome. Like,
Craig Childs, who's on our board, would be very interested in that. He's very knowledgeable about those alternative routes across the plateau and so on.
Yeah. So that would be my first thought. I would like to find ways to make more programs, and like Regina said, overlapping the generations, not just youth, but I love kids, so that's where my brain goes first. But yeah, I don't know, even just ideating new things together is great. So because that's how we've come to some of these ideas. So
We're also exploring, with Regina's leadership, the possibility of an Indigenous Advisory Council. Do you want to talk the same thing on that? Or we can just we can share more about that as that evolves as well.
And even maybe with that, there could be a youth board.
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I used to work at a nonprofit in Boulder, and to engage like the Latinx population, we had a youth
Yes,
Latinx advisory
absolutely.
board, and they helped. They ended up being a lot of like the volunteers or the interns that we'd have at our summer camp, but they
Yeah.
also created ideas for the program.
Absolutely.
that's really cool.
Great idea.
Well, it's dinner time. Is there anything else you want to say to wrap it up, Leah?
Well, I might just add something. Is last time I was at the fall event, I sat with Rick and Regina and Tucker, who used to be the ED for TI, and both Rick and Regina shared with us that even like the very simple conversations and gestures of building relationships go a long way. So I think even if we found ways to just go down to visit them and have some coffee, or Sun Ute has a really cool climbing gym, and I've been telling them I want to go climb with them and the kids. But I think even the very simple ways that you would hang out with any friend hold the power the same way a big event does. So going out of your way to just try to do some of that, I think can be really powerful. So yeah.
Great.
Do you have
Wow.
anything else?
Thank you.
Just thank you guys for coming out and being a part of this conversation and continuing to be present. I look forward to being out here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regina.
I love